My name is Gladys Perez Moalem. I am the coordinator of Women Learning Group. Our topic today is the screen revolution, what to think, what to do, by Dr. Amnon Jacob Suissa, professor at University of Quebec in Montreal. He is specialized on addiction and a precious member of our synagogue, the Spanish and Portuguese in Montreal. I would like to welcome our Rabbi Maimon Pinto to give us his blessings through Pasuk of Pirkei Avot, followed by Lizette Shashua, who will read a short biography of our today's speaker, Dr. Amnon Suissa. Rabbi Pinto, bevakasha, bechavod.
Thank you so much, Gladys. Thank you for your kind words and your introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's always a pleasure to be part of the Women's Learning Group. Thank you, Professor Amnon Suissa, for being here and accepting Gladys' invitation. And we look forward for your presentation. I don't want to be too long. I'll just say a few words about the Pirkei Avot. As you all know, that we've started learning the Pirkei Avot every Shabbat. Pirkei Avot is the ethics of our fathers. Every Shabbat we learn a different chapter leading up to Shavuot. What's interesting about the Pirkei Avot, which is very different than any other compilation of the Mishnah, as the Pirkei Avot being part of the Talmudic writings of the Mishnah, is that it's teaching us about ethics. Usually all the different parts of the Mishnayot and the Talmud usually deal with laws pertaining to religious laws, to laws between man and his neighbors and so forth. And here we find a whole tractate of different ethics that were conveyed to us by the different sages. What's very different about this book, which is a book of ethics and moral values, is that at every segment of the Pirkei Avot, we find a name of a different rabbi that taught that specific teaching, which is very different than any philosophy book that I'm sure that some of you might have read some philosophy books. We never find such a style of, at every single section, Rabbi Meir said, Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Hillel said, Shabai, and so forth. What is the importance of quoting the name? Well, what is the importance of quoting the name at every single sage? One of the explanation for that is that there is a famous saying that says in the Talmud, Keshot et hatzmecha ve'achar כך keshot acherim. In other words, in proper English, it would be practice what you preach. And the importance of stating the name of every sage in the Pirkei Avot is telling us that every single sage, whatever he actually said, whatever he taught in the ethics and moral values, he actually preached. Whatever he preached, he actually practiced. And here, the importance of stating the name of every single sage. One of a very famous part of the Pirkei Avot, adage in the Pirkei Avot, states as follows, by Rabbi Hillel Azaken, it says like this, Im ani kan, akol kan. Hillel said, if I am here, everything is here. What does that mean? Hillel was known to be a very humble person. And this statement, this adage, doesn't show too much of humility. If I'm here, everything is here. What does that mean? So let's try to connect that to today's presentation. I think in today's society and the screen generations of having so many things, so many distractions, we never feel that we're actually living the present moment. We're always busy with something else that is not around us. When we sit at the table with our children, we're looking at our phones or we're looking at another screen. We're not living the actual moment, that specific moment that we are given. When the Torah tells us that we have to be present, when you are doing something, when you are praying, when you are eating, when you're conversing with your wife or with your children, you have to be present in order to maximize the moment itself. And part of this geula, of a redemption, is redeeming every single moment so we acquire it and we live it to its fullest. And I think that according to the presentation that Professor will give us, this is what Hila was also telling us in our generation, that we have so many distractions, so many advertisements. You're going on the street, there's advertisements everywhere. You're even watching something on YouTube or whatever you're watching, all of a sudden, all these pop-ups for this advertisement, that advertisement, where you're never really living the moment and maximizing the potential of the moment. So Hila was telling us, if I am here, Imani Khan, if I'm here with my wife, with my children, with my family and my friends, Akol Khan, everything is here because I'm living the moment and I'm maximizing the moment and its potential, living life at its fullest. So we see from here that the teaching of our sages is eternal through, the Pirkei Avot was written over 2,000 years ago, and the vision of the sages still today is very pertinent to us in our generation. And I hope that after the presentation of Professor Amnon, we'll be able to ourselves know how to kind of navigate between the different distractions and try to live our life to the fullest. Buchim to you. I give the blessings to all of you and enjoy the beautiful presentation by Professor Amnon Suissa.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I always like Pirkei Avot, but from the words you said now, I am going to join you. Please, everybody, welcome and join Rabbi Pinto in his speeches about Pirkei Avot. It's very interesting, and we would like to be with you. Thank you, Rabbi. I would like to welcome our Vice President, David Nathaniel, that I see his name here and I see he is with us. Thank you for joining us, David. It's very busy and I appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. I appreciate it very much. I'm also very interested to hear Dr. Suissa's presentation. I have 4 kids and so I think we have a screen revolution in our house. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say. So thank you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate you joining us and as busy as you are. Thank you. I would like to invite now our friend Lizette Shashua to say a few words about the biography of our wonderful Professor Amnon Suissa. Lizette Shashua, bevakasha bechavod.
Thank you. Internet is omnipresent and an indispensable tool for our social and economic ties. Its usage, when abused, can cause psychological problems that lead to cyber addictions. What to think and what to do with youth who spend too much time on screens? How to inform worried parents about this internet revolution? The future is not to disconnect, but a new data hygiene. What can we learn from research and practice today in order to assess who can develop an abusive relation with these cyber activities? Dr. Suissa will share his expertise on the matter and attempt to illustrate how people can develop an addiction while sharing through concrete examples, scientific results, and tools for prevention. Now, Jacob, the speaker's background, Dr. Jacob Amnon Suissa is an associate professor with the School of Social Work at Université du Québec à Montréal. He has a background in family therapy and sociology and is the author of several books and 100 scientific articles on the phenomenon of addiction and intervention. These include Sommes-nous trop branchés? La cyberdépendance, Are We Too Connected? Cyber Addiction, Le Monde des AA, The World of AA with PUQ Quebec University Press, Pourquoi l'alcoolisme n'est pas une maladie, Why Alcoholism is not a disease, and Le jeu compulsif, Vérité et mensonge pathological, gambling, truths and lies, with additions. Dr. Suissa is involved in research with Quebec's public health, covering issues of screens, families, and children 0 to 5 years old. He is often invited in Canada and abroad for scientific interventions, conferences, trainings, and research collaborations. Thank you very much. Looking forward.
Thank you, Lizette. That was great. Please welcome with me Dr. Amnon Jacob Suissa. Bevakasha bechavod.
Thank you, everybody. And shalom and good morning, everyone. I like, first of all, to thank the committee, the Women's Educational Committee. I like to thank Rabbi Pinto. I like to thank my childhood and family neighbor, Cantor Ben Lolo. You didn't know, but his family was living just nearby mine. And his mother will come Saturday in order to have the famous hot water. It's quite a good memory for me. And like to also to thank Mr. Edmond Elbaz, who I really appreciate very much. And without forgetting also my dear friends close to me, my friend Ilan, who is here from Switzerland, Zurich, my nephew, Michael, who is here, and my dear colleague and friend from University of Tel Aviv, who is here in front of you, and she is also an addiction expert, Madame Belle Gabrielle Free, here that you have on your screen. She's a colleague of mine from University of Tel Aviv. So I'm going to try to be very, to resume. I cannot share. I can share for hours, but for the purpose of this morning. So and please feel very comfortable to ask some question at the end, also in French, if some people feel more at ease in French. As you can see, I don't have a British accent. I have a more French accent. So let's go. And as you can see, we live absolutely in generations that people were born in these high-tech environments where there are so multiple informations that are spreading in a very speedy way, where the brain simply cannot reach the same level of the speed of the high-tech and all the technologies in our environment. What do they have in common? All these people we know, what I call the giants of the web, these people will not allow their own children and teenagers to be exposed to screen before the age of 13 and 14. All these people who are multi-billionaires and to a certain extent really govern the future world they do not let their children reach or be exposed to screens. So it's important to underline that. It is impossible to overpass the concrete environment where we live today since almost 2 years, the pandemic. So what does it do to us? Definitely to compensate loneliness. This is not something we choose, so it has a more direct effect. It is imposed. This loneliness, because the reduction of social ties and the COVID, to stay enclosed has also an effect on our brain. It's equivalent to fasting. So it's like you do Kippur on a continuous basis if we are lacking social ties. Closed school, golden age, elderly, there is more time to invest in on screens. And sadly, tragedies and deaths happen with this COVID. So there are less spaces for griefs, for rituals, and sometimes traumas. You surely know that, but just for me, I like to underline it, how important what type of world we are living in as a sociologist. Not only we are not equal in front of the COVID, we live in a world where we are less and less solicited as members of groups. We are more solicited as individuals. So a famous psychologist who is the pioneer of what we call positive psychology, Martin Seligman, said, if we are too isolated, it can, after some stages, take us to a condition where we have to learn living with despair and sometimes even give up. He did many research and it's fascinating, the results. In short, he says, when people have good experiences in the outside world, not being in isolation, these people will have more chances to pass through obstacles. And as we all know, there's also, although it is confinement, we have great momentum for solidarity, can change our old mechanisms. Maybe we have no other choices. We simply need to adapt to a new environment that is dictated by this famous pandemic. A famous philosopher wrote a book called Living in an Unpredictable World. So he suggests, not to be maybe too exposed to listening to news too much, maybe 30 minutes a day would be good. And he invites all the people to get involved with activities that can generate pleasure and coming from what he calls the inside out. That means something that really we did develop in our lifestyles. If we can call it cultivate the positive in our daily actions. And this is something that we simply have to deal with in the context of pandemic. Reassess our perspective with freedom, and that it is something we cannot avoid. It does questions us about what we do right now, the here and now, but on a daily basis and also for the future. Some ideas about the internet, where we have more than 4 billion people using internet. As we can see in this image, the parents are kind of saying to the teenager, we find that you spend too much time on the screen. But as Rabbi Maimon Pinto did point out, we have to be also models. We cannot just, we have to show that what we behave or the way we behave has to be what we say and what we do. Following the facts that we that with the index addiction with internet and smartphones in particular, some cities did decide to allow complete sidewalks in large cities, in this case in China, in Washington, Anvers, in Switzerland. As you can see here, in order to avoid accidents, they will put this sidewalks where people can go freely and do their SMS and textos and everything. And in Israel, as you can see, since it is a high-tech country, they have also this LED lights for zombies who are, they will allow you on the sidewalk itself. You can have the green light, as you can see, or they will say, no, be careful. There's a red light, you cannot go. Maybe there are some construction work or too much traffic and you can have accidents. It is also we cannot avoid to talk about what's going on in this new society with what I call the masters of the world lately. You have some business group, as I say, it's called GAFAM, which is Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft, these huge people who have the average income is like $1,000 billion. Some call them feudal lords. Yeah, they were not, they didn't pass through what, this voting or being democratically through the rules of democracy. So there is definitely some adjustment to be done. In Europe, you have this lady, she's fighting very hard, Margaret Vestager. And later you have the Australian government and many other countries, including Canada, who wants to impose at least a minimum international tax in order for them to share a minimum of the gain, the revenues that they are really simply huge and do not want to share, do not want to pay taxes. The big data that as digital citizens, if we can use that word, it's since 2007, you have what they call the self-tracking. So not only we can be geo-localized, but they are capable of knowing who we are, with whom we are, what we do, what we buy, what we prefer. And it's not only gathering the data, it's gathering this data and identify what type of behaviors we are into, and in order to reshape the data to have to be more in connection with our concrete daily behaviors. This is what it's called persuasive design. Is it sold with really our consent? Most of the time, it is without our consent and our personal data, and we have all the famous scandals that we can hear here and there. For the first time, we are informed by all these unbelievable multiple sources of information, but at the same time, we are the main informers. We are really nourishing this system of interactive information. We are giving our personal data. We can ask the famous question, who is the owner? At the end of the day, who is the owner of this data? I like this sentence. If you don't pay, it is because you are the product. You are the target. Simply, that's the fact. So it's not really a generosity act. It's we are the product ourselves. In these huge companies, there are no addiction services or prevention programs. They're simply non-existent. They know, and this is really might be worrying if we think about it, they know if we are alone, they know if we are vulnerable, they know if we are depressed, they know if you are introverted, and it does questions what's going on behind the screens. We all heard about what we call algorithms behind the screens, and we might think it's something that is neutral. No, it's not neutral. It is controlled with, like any company who wants to invest, so they want a return on the investment and the gain. And for your information, as you can see, even algorithms are used in order to target certain citizens where they will have more income. For example, although we love to have equality between men and women in terms of income, they will at this stage target more the men than the women. Also, as insurance companies function, they will try to eliminate seeker potential clients, which is going to be more costly. So that's what they do. Normally in insurance, if you have a pool of 100 people, some people might be a little sicker than others, but we pay a premium, and it is a kind of an equalizing condition. This might not be the same in the future, because will be more candidates to be targeted, as maybe we are potentially sicker and we can be eliminated from the pool of being covered by insurances. We all know, people have children, they buy toys, etc. But you have special toys lately. For example, they will, as the gambling private industry, they will create conditions within the toy that will have more interaction with the baby, with the little child, with the infant. So they will retain his name and be more interactive. They can recognize the voice and claim his attention. It is, let's take an example like this. It's a doll called Kyla. And what we realize in terms of security is that hackers can talk to your child without knowing it. So not only interact more with your child through microphones, cameras, they also gather data and I recall on our behaviors. This is very important to underline. It can go that far. They want to know what type of baby is this baby. We can call it screen revolution, because there is a new paradigm to take in account. There is the screen logic within the book story logic, and it is totally different. When we read a book, it's our personal primary identity, the real one, who is one-on-one reading and being one primary identity. With the screens, we can occupy multiple, what I call arenas. We can be in multiple places and put multiple screens that to a certain extent can have an effect at one point. I recall, and I just try to remind, although we all know that, but internet, it's a public space, even in your own room and with your pajamas, in your bedroom. And when you use internet, it is a public space. So it's important to remind. Another aspect that is very important, because Rabbi Pinto said so many information we have to deal with, it's important to remind all of us that the brain is not a multitask brain. Our brain is monotask. For sure, we can chew gum and walk on the street and the sidewalk, but definitely our brain is monotask. And it's important to underline, although we can do two things at the same time, sometimes more, but our brain is done and configured as being a monotask. We can ask ourselves also, is it working for us as human beings, the digital revolution? But definitely a revolution by definition is not an evolution, it's a revolution. It's a reverse. You do reverse. The evolution will completely transform our daily life. In this logic, just during the last 10 years, the time invested on screen have tripled. So we have 3 times more time invested. Is what some researchers call hyperconnectivity. What does it do really? Is it working for us? Some people say less and less the case because it tends to impoverish our thought and weaken our face-to-face relationships. As Rabbi Pinto underlined, the here and now, kan, in Hebrew, it is important. If I am here now, ani kan, haolam kan, this is important. We can see here that among the youth who are maybe more exposed, we can have more attention deficit disorder, delay in language development, and definitely if they spend more time at the detriment of other multiple sources in their lifestyle, and sometimes if they abuse of the screen, social skills also might be targeted there. In Asia, it is a public health issue, not a public health for research. No, it's a policy. It already reached the policy. It's a public social policy. So you have 3 hours time exposure at 2 years old. It should question us really what type of child development are we facing when we have these issues. Taiwan imposes 1,500 euros if your 2-year-old child is exposed to screen. They can give you really a ticket and you have to pay. Close to 5 hours a day, it's the tendency of children from 8 to 12 years old. Teenagers with the pandemic can go even close to 7 hours a day and more. Contrary to the book, or a task you do, or a series you watch on TV, I say, well, next week I will see the number 4 episode, the series, or you read a book, I'm gonna have the other chapter next week or tomorrow, and you stop, you pass to another task. Not with the screen. The screen, you have no stopping cue. It's simply it's a continuous non-stop exposure. You can spend hours and hours because the configuration of the people who did conceive also the high tech want us maybe to be more exposed to the screens for certain reasons. So there is no stopping cue with the screen, contrary to when we read a newspaper or books or a series on TV, can move to another task. On a neurological brain perspective, if we can use the word, there's a new book written by Desmurger, so we did follow really brains of multiple thousands of people, children, teenagers, and he comes with a certain recommendation. Less a child is exposed to screen, better his brain is. As you can see, it is logically connected to this master of the world who simply do not want to expose their own children to the screens. There should be some reason there. How come they don't? The TV time or the screen time yearly can go until 2,500 hours of interactions with parents. And as said earlier, the less you read, the more you might have language deficit, vocabulary, articulating thoughts in terms of syntax, concentration. And he did do the research here. And for the kindergarten level, you have almost 1,000 hours equivalent of a full school year, people spending time on screens to the detriment or at the detriment of interactions with friends or parents and family and loved ones. primary school can go to 2 school years and high school even to 2.5 school years. My simple logic is as follows. The more we are connected to the screens, the more lonely we are. So brain research shows that when we are too isolated, this is sadly the tendency for many people because of the pandemic, because of the screens, because of the function the screens occupy in our lifestyle. It is associated with feeling of threat. When too isolated, we feel threatened. A research of more than 40,000 youth, and it shows once again that even after 1 hour of exposure, you have less psychological well-being, less curiosity, less self-control, and find it more difficult to have friends. Many of the references you have there, like say Twang and Campbell, they have, I'm sure most of you know, you have TED Talks, and you can go and deeper your knowledge about it if you are curious, wanting to go further about the information. In Canada, I talked with this researcher, her name is Fitzpatrick, and she took, almost the same 41,000, and she said you have negative effects on the lifestyle and on the health. So it is not a Greek mythology here. This is concretely what's going on and what we do observe. Yes, let's go now, and for the next time, I'm going to speak about video games, then the smartphone, and then the social media, and finish with some cues or paths of solutions that might be useful and helpful. As you can see, it's not only children and teenagers who can develop addiction to video games. You have this lady who really loves being there and playing almost the whole day. She's 80 years old. The confinement for the video games have underlined a record for the industry in terms of income. Look at all these famous, maybe the Minecraft. We talk about hundreds of millions here. Fortnite, Facebook gaming. It's not just social media. They are interested to develop other sources of income. And as you can see here, you have Facebook gaming brings almost $300 million. You have Amazon, you have YouTube. Everybody's interested in making more money with video games. Are there any markers for people who develop the video game addiction? Yes, we can pinpoint some of them. What allows the people to develop more addiction to video games more than others, like with gambling, you will develop more addiction with what we call the lottery video machines versus other bettings. Here we can have some markers that helps us and allows us. First, the infinity. It's simply nonstop. You can be there, come at 2 o'clock, new pajamas, you want to play video games, you are more than welcome. They will allow you to be there all the time. Another marker, it's certainty. You're going to have immediate gratification, and all what you have to do is just to invest more time. It is also the world in terms of aesthetics, if we can use that word. It's very magical and very attractive. As you know, many video games have been the inspiration to make more movies. Why? Because they invest a lot of money in order to attract people, and they have certain neurological, psychological, economical purposes to reach. Another marker that allows us to understand why people invest so much time on the video games is the sense of belonging. It gives you a sense of belonging without revealing who you are. We all know in the development of any human being, we have to have an equilibrium, or what we call homeostasis, between socialization, belonging, in one hand, and our own individual personal development in the other hand. And when we keep this equilibrium, that's fine. But if we don't have a sense of belonging, so it has an effect on the identity. And definitely when we think about teenagers, they are not considered infants and they are not considered adults. They are sitting between two chairs and they are in search of their own identity, willing to discover, wanting to explore who they are. And definitely the social media or the video games can be an arena where you can try to explore who they are. If in the real world, in real life, we do things that are not really desirable, we might have what I call a social reaction. You know, you'll be more punished if you don't do your duties at work, at school, at home, you don't follow the rules. Not with the video games. Why? You have simply to rebound and invest more time. You can learn via failures, but you have to invest more time in order to be good and in order to survive in an environment dictated by the video game dynamics that are proper to each game. What's behind the screen when we play video games is the more you progress, the more you need to enlarge the group and you have to invest more time. We saw behaviors where many teenagers, for example, because they are afraid of losing their status within the video game dynamics, they will hire other people and pay them to play while they are absent because they have to go to school, etc., because they don't want to lose the status they reach as an avatar, as a character in the video game configuration. Fortnite, you surely heard about this famous game, mostly the parents who have children. If we do a survey and we pass with a microphone and pass it to teenagers, believe me, almost 90% they know what Fortnite is. So what is Fortnite? Is, as you can see, is 250 million players. It's not just a game, it's also an industry where they want you as a gamer to bonify your experience by accessories, gadgets, changing costumes. As you can see here, they will sell you all types of gadgets in order to bonify your character as a player in the video game. Let's say you are a warrior or you want to be a leader, something you are not in your real life. You go in the video game and you can buy some accessories that will allow you to have some more protection and accessories as a warrior or as a leader in the game. $3 billion, we are not talking millions of dollars, we are talking billions of dollars just in 2018 with 100 million rewards that are given back. This is a neuro marketing strategy to raise what I call the social acceptance more, social desirability. It's being, if you want people to continue to dig into your game, you have to give them a reward, so otherwise they will never come back. And they learned that from the gambling industry. You have always to give winners, you have to show that there are some winners, otherwise people will not do bettings. And in order to raise the social desirability, globally speaking, in society, they will do that. They will give $100 million, but when we compare it with $3 billion in code, it's a good strategy. And lately we saw two 16-year-olds who won $3 million because they won the competition. So what type of message does it send to teenagers around the world, that you can be maybe, why do I have to work? Why do I have to? Some of them might think they will be able to reach and become millionaires because, by investing more time. And I spoke earlier what I call the persuasive design, and Fortnite has a great ally. It is neuropsychology. They use neuropsychology. Why? Because the brain of teenagers is not fully built. It is more flexible and we can control it more. And the private industry of video games have two main objectives. As you can see here on the screen, the first one is, how can I get them interested in the game? Are there any tools I can use in order to get them more interested in the game? That's one goal. Second goal is to make them retain them front of the screens. How can we use some tools in order to retain them front of the screen? We can ethically question this approach, but definitely some ethical issues can be raised. 2019, just before the pandemic, at the Douglas Hospital, right here nearby where we are, Dr. Valérie Bobot did a research. What did she find? What she did is she took gamers who invest a lot of time versus gamers who invest less time, and she looked at the brains and followed them. And what she found is the following. We have the limbic system in the back of our head, which is more connected to what we can say emotions, feelings, and it is connected with neurotransmitter to the cortex, which is here more mathematics, more reasoning, more pragmatism. And that's why we have what we call appropriate behaviors. We reason versus behavior. What she found in this research, that when it is abused, the action of being front of the video games is high, we can have depression, we can have memory and mental issues. So on a neurological level, there are more and more proofs that it might have an impact on the brain. And when we talk about hippocampus atrophy, this is on a long term too. It might translate into having more Alzheimer. It's something more than we think. I talked earlier about sense of belonging. Fortnite game offers a tribe, like being a member of a clan, a tribe. In one hand, it avoids marginality, and also it answers a need, especially among, as I said earlier, the total identity process is not filled, as a teenager. We also hire people who can have some impact on the teenagers. We can go, a rapper, Drake, who is well known, or NBA players as models. And I remind ourselves, all of us, that the goal of this type of game is who will remain standing among 100 players in this island. This is the goal of the game. Who will be the winner? Who will be the Rocky? Who will be the Rambo? Who will be the winner? So in Asia, as I said, many people died. I mean, I am waiting my words. They don't have problems. They die. It's a social public policy. It's a public issue, a health issue. We can also realize that the more people are getting involved in video games, they might need more, so we call some substances like minor stimulants, coffee, energy drinks. And sometimes we can see in the very heavy behaviors, they can even take other more drugs to be able to continue, in order to adapt to the situation where they are. And definitely we can see more and more the addiction symptoms. This is a research where we can see from 11 to 14 years old, the virtual identity self is seen as more competent than the real self. And the rate of depression for young teenagers of this age or early teenage time is low, but in this case, it's reached almost 15.5%, which is a very high percentage. And the phrase I am reading now, I think is important for us to share. It's not the behavior that is a determinant. It's the function it occupies in the lifestyle of the person and vice versa. In other words, what role does it play in this particular lifestyle of this teenager, in this young adult, etc.? What does it try to do? Does it try to suppress a feeling of loneliness, of boredom, of low self-esteem? The private industry of video games shows us the following. Their goal is try to connect as much as possible the player's emotions to the character they choose. In other words, more the player invests with his emotions in the character he chooses or with his avatar, more he will experience problems. And when we know the same with the gambling online industry and gambling in casinos, they will try to create the best conditions for you to spend more time. And if possible, emotions with these erroneous beliefs that you have more experience, etc., the more time you invest. Hikikomori is simply a condition in Japan where people play nonstop in video games. And Elizabeth Woolley is a mother who sadly lost her son in video games and did create, according to the model, what we call the 12 steps, like Alcoholic Anonymous or Gambler Anonymous. She created a group called Organon.org, what I find also interesting to share with you is the people who were addicts and are not anymore addicts today. What can we learn from them? This is good. Video games, according to this population who were addicts and are not addicts today anymore, they said it is more addictive because it is based on giving us rewards and competitions in order to keep us hooked. They suggest no more than 3 hours a day. If not, we will fall into what we call the abuse cycle. And there is, as you can see here, the forum called Game Quitters, where we can share information, people who did put the addiction behind them. A Montreal researcher known internationally about stress, he also studied video games, and she said among the cons, if you play too much, if it is an early initiation as 6-year-old, you might have attention problems. And you know what's interesting about the video games is, especially if you have these wars, and it's the brain is has to focus on obstacles all the time. So you have the brain called what we call hostile attribution bias with obstacles. The attention is focused on what I'm going to find, you know, with my adversary. So I'm looking always at adversaries and obstacles instead of having a more global view. Among the pros, yes, we might have more ability with intentions. They can also treat the info faster than the average person, and they are much quicker than us. They have to identify, you know, visually the screen, what's going on, the characters. This said, we have also to say that these assets are not in real life transferable. Issues about violence and video games. The USA Supreme Court did not find any direct link. Although, and we have this famous researcher that you can, Daphne Rocheter, that you can find in TED Talks, say it can contribute to have a more accurate visual, visually speaking, concentration, short visual memory. Some psychiatrists and pediatricians who are also psychiatrists, they use sometimes video in the waiting rooms for hyperactive children or attention deficit disorder. And it is also used for less depression symptoms for the elderly when it is channeled with and really well-framed goal. McGill University, just nearby here, we also use video in order to treat health issues, and in this case, amblyopia. You know, this famous so-called lazy eye that we can have. Before it was, we had to pass through surgery, etc. This is not the case. Now we can use video, and we put certain 3D glasses, and we train more and more the brain to activate what we call the lazy eye with the regular eye. And both after 2 months, just 2 months, the brain learns to see with both eyes on a permanent basis. There's also a video game that might be interesting. It is a free game that we can download. It's a Navy game where we put people in order to identify if we have some Alzheimer symptoms. We like to know if you are the Navy man in charge of your own boat, you enter this labyrinth, and we give you some even distress rocket in case you feel too lonely or distressed. And what we know that this type of game can contribute to not only identify the behaviors, the way we behave in terms of time and space. Even for ADHD, we have a game also who, although it requires a medical doctor prescription, it allows children to control their character and reduce the ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, because through these games, they will be able to have more self-control via this character. I have to go maybe a little faster in order to cover what I did prepare. So I'll try to be as fast as I can. Smartphone. It is the most profitable product in history of the business. 1 billion sold, $720 billion. What we see is that 30% of children already used it, touch it, which is quite a remark. Online gambling, for your information, can target through the mobile phone the younger generations. Just to say, having the presence of our smartphone in our bedroom, for example, reduces our cognitive capacities. Research show when it is put in another room, we have higher results in terms of cognitive performance. As you can see in the picture, the parents say, "Oh my God, they took his cell phone and he's definitely in anger and aggressive." And yeah, I'm not teaching you anything new, but this definitely you can experiment that and you will have a reaction that is what we call nomophobia, which is the fear of missing out. In France, you cannot use your cell phone since September 2018. So we will follow up with that, see how it goes over there. A psychiatrist who did also study that say that most of us can have what he calls intimate relation with our smartphone. Among the young adults generation, they may consult the iPhone 221 times a day, which is quite huge. Sometimes it is seen as simply a memory tool, a daily assistant. And as I said earlier, here, the FOMO or nomophobia is that people, they might get into panic, not just worry, panic, high anxiety when their iPhone or smartphone is broken. The smartphone is conceived for short-term rewards. Actually, what I mean by that in order to have a reward, people, we don't know if we're going to have one is going to ring and this random, like with gambling, we don't know if we're going to win or not. Short-term rewards favors more behaviors, more addictive behaviors. This is important to underline. The case here is that a smartphone can be also used in a very positive way also. This doctor had an accident and lost her sight, so she used the voice brother and with braille and allow her to be more autonomous. She can have, do almost all of her activities. And we all know some gadgets, this fabulous smart suitcase that you don't have to take your own suitcase. It follows you automatically because it is connected to your smartphone. I saw that in Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion Airport. And we can have all types of gadgets, knowing what's going on in your fridge, or architects can have all types of maps that are 3D with an application. So he said, when is it a problem? Or what we call PMPU, which is problematic mobile phone use. We can have symptoms like sleeping disorders, loss of interest, less social ties, which is sadly the pandemic situation, participate less to family and sport and leisures that we can share with the loved ones and friends. 20% of student identify recognize that they are addicts, and it is quite a high number, and it is the tendency it might grow. Why we do that? It's because we need feedbacks as human beings. And on the screens, whether it is through the smartphone or social media, we like to have the thumb up and be liked. So addiction, as you can see in this picture here, although he's studying, he thinks about his all these tools, and he's thinking about it. So it's between his two ears. Addiction begins there, between the two ears. And a reminder that social ties, or what I call face-to-face relations, are carriers of affect. They are indispensable for our psychics, for our mental health. As we all know, yes, it's great when we use the screens to get closer to people who live far away, but it can keep away also from the people who are close loved ones. What about Facebook? It's the largest country in the world, 2,500,000,000 members. I remind all of us that everything we put in Facebook, it's Facebook property. It is important to once again underline that. Researcher almost 10 years ago, Hoffman, did study, and he was the first one who brought the addiction idea about being addicted to Facebook. He said, because it is free, because it is anonymous, because I don't have to go and have money and to go and buy, if I want to buy some cannabis or other drugs, these conditions will allow the people to develop more addictions. And he even went further. He is more specialized on what we call the desire concept, but how can we explain what's, desire? People desiring to do this instead of other things. And he said it can be even more dangerous than heroin. Other Scandinavian researchers have now a tool, that it's called Bergen Social Media Addiction Scale. We can, just download it, put the name, and it helps us, having some questions to open dialogue with our loved ones and try to see how it works. The more we use Facebook, the more becomes our personality extension. I don't teach you anything new by saying loneliness is a central factor in developing cyber addiction. And maybe you knew it, but in the United Kingdom, they have a ministry of loneliness. Since 2 years, they installed a ministry who takes care of lonely people, because they realized that for almost 2 months, many people who were lonely, they didn't have any visits, they were not touched physically, nobody came and show them some attention or empathy. And it is very costly to have people, because these people in return will go to the emergency hospitals, and we cost a lot of money for the government. Yeah, maybe just to say that our brain do not evolve at the same rhythm as technology. So this is important to say. it's impossible for us to follow the way technology goes. And in Burma, in this country, when people buy a smartphone, for example, or Facebook is already part of the phone. This is not our case here. That's our last research. I invite you, if you have time, to go on Netflix and watch a movie called Social Dilemma. In French is Derrière nos écrans de fumée. It really gives you a great idea. It's a great documentary of the issues we are facing today with all the screens. And the curve of the use, sometimes abuse of social networks are correlated with more self-mutilations, more suicidal attempts among teenagers, raised with 60% in America. When we click, I like, I don't like, the markers are that they can identify what age group we are, our sex orientation, our IQ, our personality trait. So some researchers say, listen, I like to be a Facebook member, but I prefer to pay in order to keep my privacy. As with gambling, we have erroneous beliefs, like the virtual contact can be seen as a real one, which is absolutely untrue. Some people compare it to junk food of socialization, might be delicious, but it's non-nutritive, equivalent to empty calories. You have plenty of books and research now. Our brain thanks us every day to have real social ties. And contrary to the fear of missing out, we have now the joy of missing out. And you have here the authors, great books saying that we need that. 2,000 college students say the more, if they abuse of social networks, we cannot be surprised to say they will sleep in very late hours. And it has some impacts on the memory, language, decision, emotion regulation. Quitting Facebook can make you happier. You have here the reference you can look at, Alcott Hunt, welfare effects on social media. A research done lately shows that 3,000 case studies, we have less anxiety, less polarization in political debates, less depression, improved feeling of satisfaction, and we have more time passed with loved ones and family. So we come to the heart of the issue. What is cyber addiction? After all this? Well, first, psychiatrists who identified the idea of cyber addiction, internet addiction, is a psychiatrist by the name of Goldberg, followed by a psychologist from Toronto called Kimberly Young, who is still very active in the field of the phenomenon of addiction. My own definition of cyber addiction, here it is very simple, or I try to make it simply as possible. Abusive usage. This is not a moderate usage. Abusive usage of communications tool offered by internet at the detriment of multiple sources of satisfaction, of interest in our lifestyles. This is an attempt. I normally take a longer time, but I have to make it very short. We are all candidates to develop addictions as human beings. If we pass through unpredictable, difficult events, we lose a loved one, or unpredictable crisis, etc., we might develop addiction. But not all the people develop addiction. Let's say if you want to become cyber addicts today, most of you will never be able to develop it. Why? Because you did develop multiple other sources of pleasure in your own lifestyle. In order, as you can see here, there are some 4 or 5, a cycle by itself, by definition. In order to develop the addiction, you have to be in a context of vulnerability. You have to feel your low self-esteem, you're in crisis, things are not going well at home or at work. You feel, bored or alone, not comfortable. In other words, you don't have the sense of belonging. For teenagers, as I said earlier, looking for their own construction of identity. So here we have what I would call negative emotions. I don't feel well. And for people who did develop multiple sources of pleasure and interest in life, when we feel like this, we go to the gym. We talk, and we share confidence, share information with our loved ones or our great friends. We go outdoor for some outdoor activities, and we try to act in order to avoid to fall into potential depression. But for the people who develop addictions, they feel like this, emotional, negative emotions and feelings, and they go to the online gaming, Facebook, the drug addicts going to intoxicate themselves, or gamblers. And in order to develop the addiction, every addict know that they have some artificial feeling of well-being. Otherwise, they will not stay in the cycle. So they have as a gambler, will come back to the online gambling or video game for the teenager. They will have a feeling of well-being, but important to underline, this is an artificial well-being. This is a temporary well-being feeling. This is simply to feel the emptiness or the boredom or the loneliness without attacking the root causes of the problem. And as in any addiction, you have what I call here number 4, the day after. You look at yourself at the mirror, spend too much time on video games, or spend too much money, or use too much alcohol, or whatever, and your low self-esteem come back, you feel guilty, you feel ashamed, feel bad, and 4 becomes 1, and the cycle continues. That's what explains the long-lasting system of addicted people and families. Sometimes they stay there for 10, 20 years. And people who are in number 3, they would never ask for help. They simply go here when they don't feel good, and a loved one calls for some help, and we have the opportunity to break the cycle of addiction. Another aspect that is important to consider, because the development of the child is with the book, when we tell a story to a child, there is a before, a during, and after, and the storytelling instead of the screen allows to learn something new, and what I call the event memory. In other words, the imagination is working high there in capturing the storytelling. With the screen, contrary to the storytelling, it's an eternal present, while with the book, if you tell a story to your child, it's one thing at a time. If we expose our children too early, we will contribute sadly to do an anesthesia and deprive this child development to counter depression and develop resiliency in the adulthood stage. You know, people who have imaginary, they will have more possibilities to find solutions. If you don't build on nourishing the imaginary and the imagination, you will stop the development of the child, and it is a price to pay later on. You don't need to remember, everything is in the internet. Some people suggest what they call the 3-6-9-12 rule, which is absolutely to avoid screen before 3 years old, no game before 6, internet with some 8-9 years old with a supervision, and maybe 11-12 internet, but no unlimited time. Does your child or teenager play alone or with others? It is also a marker. Alone is not a good sign. We can, through his character and avatar that he uses, for example, in his game, try to open dialogue. Tell me more about what are the qualities you find with your avatar? Why did you choose this avatar instead of another? We have all symptoms that are physical, sadly, short-sighted cases are more and more common now, as early as 8-9 years old with the screens, have back problems as early as 3-4 years, etc. We can take in account if losing the notion of time, it's a symptom to consider. Definitely, people are totally in their own world, feeling anger when the screen is not available, higher tolerance, which is, the more you use, the more you want. So they quite known with the psychoactive substances, and social isolation, lies, exhaustion. So risk factors, misusage, as you can see here in this picture by the parents, is not a good sign. If they are early initiation, that's also a tendency to reproduce what they know. As I say to my students, we reproduce only what we know. Weak supervision by the parental skills, unclear expectations. Let me remind you that, contrary to what we might think, children and teenagers love to have families with rules. It have less anxiety, more in an unpredictable world, and it sets some frame and rules. Conflictual and quality relationships in the family or couple might be also markers or as a risk, or neglect, sadly, could happen. Clear rules contribute to be a protective factor than a risk factor, and the more people living in a more predictable world, less risky behaviors we're going to have. So family rituals, just spending time together, sharing suppers, will allow us to enter and know more our children. Open dialogue. Tell me more about your avatars. I said earlier, what are the qualities? Are you online to see your friends? In your daily life, who are your real friends? We can ask these questions to the people we love, or friends, and we can use also, before they go to the screen, have a little note and writing our emotions before we go to the screen, during the screens, and after the screens. and note also the time invested versus the time spent. Because most of the time they will tell us, I'm going to spend an hour, and at the end of the day, they spend 15 hours. Instead of forbidding, better to have set limits. And also we have the pro and cons of change. You know, people, they have their own pros, their own cons. If I change my lifestyle, what do I gain? If I stay the same lifestyle, what do I gain? Versus if I change my lifestyle, what do I gain? What do I lose? So we have plenty of paths, you know, you can organize within your own settings, you know, a day without screens, or even more, a week without screens. But you have to be prepared to propose some alternatives and outdoor activities. In Israel, some parents committees, school parents having what they call an idiot phone. They worked with a company and brought this phone that are, they can give you 1 or 2 video games only, get in touch with the parents in case of a crisis, but do not allow them to have internet. Finally, you have all types of schools in USA that they simply do not allow people to have screens in their school programs. You have here some, you know, as I say, knowing more is risking less. You have an address here, postonécran.com, although it's in French. This is a very rich way of having some tools and cues to have some pertinent information. Yeah, let's see, I saw this picture, you know, this Bangladesh children have nothing, they are poor according to our values, but are they happy? I think they are. Their imagination is very alive. They have no phone, no toys, no television. Our deep, wise Albert Einstein, what did he say in 1956? He said, I fear the day that technology will surpass our human interaction. The world then will have a generation of idiots. Yeah, instead of saying no, N-O to addiction, I say, well, say no, K-N-O-W to addiction. And my word, personal one, is we gain more by expanding qualities of the individual than desperately chasing to eliminate his defects. And our friend of us all, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said, technologies, by uniting people, might also divide people locally. And defend freedom, we need education. So I think the Spanish and Portuguese Educational Committee, that's exactly what we do, we try to do. And small act of kindness can change and humanize our world. Therefore, I say to you, thank you for your attention. And thank you for being present and share this information. I am more than happy. I'll be more than happy to answer some questions and share and do some exchanges. So thank you very much for your attention.
Baruch.
Thank you.
Bravo. Bravo.
Thank you, Professors Amnon Suissa, for the great information. We learned so much. We use the internet. Maybe we are addicted to ourselves. We don't know it. But we learn what is behind the curtains, as we say.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, on the phone, I told you I could be one of them.
Well, we are all potential candidates, but we, as we say, we share so many things in our lifestyle, you know, like being part of the group. Let's say you are part of a group, and it's very interesting because you can share all types of things together, and it is a very satisfying feeling. And when it is a satisfying feeling, it is a barrier to addiction, because you have sources of pleasure, interest in your lifestyle. So you will not be a good candidate to develop an addiction.
At 12 o'clock at midnight, I am preparing myself to go to sleep. But when I see my iPad, something get me into it.
Yeah.
I start to play chess that my grandson put me into it, and start to be fascinated with it. And bridge is my game. And suddenly time passes and I see it is 2 o'clock and I
Yes, yes.
didn't go to sleep.
That's the famous stopping you,
So is that
stopping
good?
you that I talked about.
Proving my games, or I am losing sleep?
I invite you, please go ahead, feel comfortable. I don't bite, so let's go. You can have any questions. I'll be more than happy to try to answer.
Thank you so much. First of all, my dear friend Amnon, I have to tell you that I'm always impressed when you speak. You're so fascinating. I can listen to you for hours. This is not going to be a topic that's going to be resolved today. It's an amazing topic, and we all live it, and we all can see everything with our kids, with our grandkids. My little grandchild is 2 years old, and he can teach me how to get into the games and all that. So Gladys has asked me to sing a song later at the end of the show, at the end of this, and I want people to ask questions, but I have a meeting coming up. So I was thinking what kind of song I can sing for you, Amnon, and what kind of song, a little bit of.
That's so nice from you.
But how can I depict like what this whole thing is? And I say to people, and I say to myself, the song I can think of is, why don't you stop and smell the roses and look at the beautiful things that we have in the world? So I came up with, I see trees of green, red roses.
La, 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 la.
I see
La, 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 la.
for me and for you. And I think to
And I say to myself,
what a
wonderful world.
These skies of blue,
Ooh,
clouds of
la,
white,
la, la, la.
the bright blessed day,
La, 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 la.
God say good night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Colors of the rainbow are pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Bravo, and thank you.
Let's all appreciate what life has given us and what God gives us every day. So let's take a look at it.
Yes.
Off your phones.
Our dear Cantor Belolo.
Thank you very much.
Take care, my friend. Take care.
You know, I got married in the Spanish Portuguese, and the song you just sang, it was my first dance with my wife 30 years ago. Thank you.
See, it's hashkachat pratit.
Mitsuyan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amnon. Thank you very much, Gladys, and beautiful work. Love you all, and I'll see you soon.
It's just continuous to the speech that we need to enjoy the songs and everything.
Amen, amen. Take care.
And you did it for us. Thank you, Danny.
I have a question for you, Professor.
Yes, Sandra.
Given all that we knew and how much you deepened our knowledge, which I really appreciate. I think I speak for us all.
Thank you.
Can you tell us if Shabbat and honoring Shabbat can put a dent into this real epidemic?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. You know, when I share some information with my students, for example, addiction to tobacco, to cigarettes is a very, very addictive condition. It's very difficult to stop and quitting cigarettes. Why? Because you have 1,150 substances, and it's addictive. And what's interesting, with the Jewish people who respect Shabbat, when Shabbat comes, they stop. Physiology cannot explain and give a great explanation, scientifically speaking. All what they can say is that the faith and the sense of belonging and the respect and the well-being behind respecting that day is higher. The same with if you are addict to all types of things. When we become pregnant, when women become pregnant, they stop smoking. So,
wow.
Yeah. So your question is not, it is an interesting one. So I think we can begin by Shabbat and then have a more extensive Shabbat, you know, and add another day, you know, have a weekend where you cannot smoke or without screen, and try to have some introspection about it. You know, how do I feel about it? Does it make me feel better? Did I accomplish something? And open dialogue with my loved ones. Maybe we can, you know, put things, you know, in another room when we have dinners, all types of little things we can do in order to have more interactions and more face-to-face, because we are all in need. It's a big plus, but it's also a big need for our equilibrium, for our mental health. And it is important to take all the mediums or the tools we have to cherish, you know, this face-to-face.
Yes, because as you pointed out, there's a new medical department in England for loneliness. And
yes.
I think one word that if we have to put things on two sides of the scale, one would be addiction. On the other side, to balance, would you say would be intimacy?
Listen, I think the challenges we face, as asked earlier, you know, what can we foresee for the next 10 years, is that the screen time might be higher than today.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Because we have all types of huge companies, you know, this GAFAM and all these billionaires who have different agenda than ourselves, than as citizens. And it's not necessarily, you know, a good chemistry between these two positions. So we have to be vigilant. We have to know that screens are not a passive condition. They are sometimes, when we develop the addiction, potentially they can be a silent epidemic. And we have to be very careful because it does touch our private intimacy life. It goes very, very much, very deep. You know, we can see China, they have 200 million cameras all over. They choose who is a good citizen, who is a bad citizen. We don't want to go into these directions. We want to keep our intimacy,
Professor,
etc.
I was shocked when you said about the toys that have smart things,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
especially
yes.
for us grandparents to be aware. And like, there's nothing like putting a child on your lap and turning the pages of a book. Now
Yes.
that's called intimacy.
Yes, thank you for your questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Lydia, yes.
Knowing government, knowing that this is already an addiction and it might be heading to a global epidemic. It's not like a virus. This is something that can be controlled now. Why aren't they putting some kind of limit on these big companies to somehow curb all this new direction that they're going to?
This is a good question. I know that in the public health, and I collaborate with some of them, they have at heart your question and they work very hard for it. Soon, a minister, the name of Stephen Guilbeault, will propose a policy for Canada where they're going, these huge companies have to share more their income and go give back to the government and to ourselves, finally, you know, as citizens, all the money they take from us, sometimes without our, most of the time without our consent. That's first. Second, there are many programs that are more and more disseminated in the school systems and in prevention, in many organizations. And we have to invest even more, as you suggest, in order to speak openly about these issues that are part of our daily life, and especially in pandemia, where the screen occupies even more time. So I think you know, as it works, you know, people change when you have people, for, let's say, when the people, if we had here a case in Quebec, we all know, we heard about him, the son of the businessman Taillefer. He killed himself because he was too addicted to video games. So if, for example, the Ministry of Health, Minister of Health, let's say Christian Dubé, who is the Minister of Health today in Quebec, if his son is killed by video games, I can assure you that tomorrow we will have a public policy the way you did formulate your question. So the same way we had different policies, public policies for, you know, against violence with women and children, because the Prime Minister was touched by the issue himself. So to sensitize the political powers, we can take all types of means. There are now only, you know, there's not only one road to reach that goal. We can do everything we can. We can sign petitions. We can sensitize parents' committees in schools. We can do all types of empowering people and gathering pertinent information, because we want the future of our children and grandchildren to be more protected. We can do that. I believe we can.
Amazing.
If I might ask,
Thank you.
if I
By
might,
the way, you gave us a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful lecture. We really enjoyed it. And it's something that's touching all of us now, not just us adults, but through our children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you.
בבקשה.
Thank you so much for a great, great speech. that we never thought, you taught us things that we never thought about. We use it and we don't know what is behind it. And you explained everything that we never knew about and we never thought about. Thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.
So
Now I would like to invite our immediate past president, Edmond Elbaz, to give us the closing remarks. And before that, I would like to thank you, Edmond, for inviting for us our great, great Professor Amnon Suissa. Thank you. Thank you so much. Edmond Elbaz, bevakasha, bechavod.
What a beautiful presentation. I think I could have just stayed here and continue listening for the rest of the day.
Yeah, for sure.
A beautiful introduction by our rabbi and concluded very, very well by our cantor with that beautiful song.
Absolutely.
Having said that, je tiens à remercier notre ami, Dr. Amnon Suissa, pour son excellente présentation ainsi que pour la richesse des informations qu'il nous a prodiguées ce matin. Je dois avouer que l'idée de cette conférence lui revient. Amnon me l'avait suggéré généreusement il y a fort longtemps. Elle devait avoir lieu dans notre sanctuaire, pour notre communauté à large. Cela ne s'est pas réalisé pour différentes raisons, comme en ce moment avec la pandémie, etc. Mais cela n'est que partie remise. En tant qu'éducateur, j'ai vécu moi-même l'exemple de ce dont Dr. Suissa nous a parlé. Lorsque nous avions introduit dans nos écoles le iPad, eh bien, dans la cour de l'école, il n'y avait plus de joie, si je dis, ni dans les corridors. Tous ceux qui avaient l'habitude de jouer ensemble, de socialiser ensemble et tout ça, se sont retrouvés isolés ou se retrouver obligatoirement isolés dans des corridors pour consulter leur iPad. Au lieu de socialiser, ils s'isolaient de plus en plus, au point que nous avons été obligés de dire aux enfants, aux adolescents que nous avions, de laisser leur ordinateur dans leur casier avant de sortir en récréation ou aller pendant le lunch. Et ça a été une décision très, très saine pour tout le monde. The screen revolution was inevitable with the speed of information shared today by each one on iPhone or tablet, with all the impacts on our social behavior. Speaking about tablets, you know who first introduced them? Anybody could tell me?
Oh, what was the question?
Yeah, I hear you.
Who first introduced the tablet?
Moses.
Pardon me?
Moses.
The 10 Commandments.
That's right. Is that right?
The first one to introduce the tablet, and they were even connected to iCloud. So, having said that, thank you very much, Amnon.
Welcome.
I hope we'll invite you for another session. This time,
Yes, please.
Level, because there is so much questions
With attention.
raising from your own presentation that we need to explore a little bit more. So thank you very much. And be well, be safe, and we hope to have you again with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Edmond, and thank you so much, every one of you. And I'll be glad to be among you in the near future. So have a great day and a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you. Be well.
Very nice.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Professor, for the great, great information. We learned so much things that we never thought about. Thank you.